Big thank you to Empires and Puzzles for sponsoring today's video. Over the last few years on this channel, we have reviewed quite a few of the world's most popular anime and manga. Some might call me an expert, others might call me a professional bad takes haver, but regardless, we have reviewed everything from Dragon Ball to Keijo. So, I think the time has finally come for me to rank each and every one of the stories I've covered on this channel in one big tier list. The content and selection of which will likely haunt me for the rest of my career because taste is a fickle thing. Despite this, however, I think it could be a fun trip down memory lane revisiting some of these great stories to share my thoughts after so much time having passed. Have my judgments remained the same on these series, or have the sands of time crushed my spirit? You'll have to stay tuned to find out, and kicking this list off, fittingly, we're beginning with the story that started it all for me. I'm of course talking about the one, the only, Dragon Ball series. I have covered Dragon Ball extensively on this channel, there's no hiding it, and as many of you know, this series takes many different forms and in this case, ranks in many different ways depending on which one you're referring to. As a reviewer, I've been fortunate to cover brilliant stories, and while there are aspects I loved from Dragon Ball GT, it is by far the product I enjoyed the least upon revisit and review. I liked the concept behind Baby and the overall execution of the arc, minus its ending. I liked the final spirit bomb with Kid Goku, and largely I liked the last episode too, but I think that's despite the series more so than it is a direct result of it. With that said, there's clearly a ton of potential in the series, and if you like it, I can sort of see why. Sort of, but for me, when comparing it to other properties on this list, it's a solid D tier entry. In saying that, while I prefer Dragon Ball Super, it isn't much better. Plagued early on with 2 recap arcs possessing animation so bad it launched my career here on YouTube, it had storylines that made absolutely zero logical sense when you stop to think about it, and even the parts that are considered the best material, they still are surrounded by quite a lot of bloat. Despite this, however, I'd be lying if I said Super didn't ignite the kid inside me like anything else. I'm a massive Dragon Ball fan if it wasn't abundantly clear, and unlike GT, I felt Super offered more moments to rally behind and praise when all was said and done. I really liked Ultra Instinct. Goku Black as a character was so damn fun, and again, despite some truly cursed animation schedules early on, Toei was able to deliver some of the best episodic animation the franchise had ever seen up until that point. Plus, some of the new stuff in the manga is pretty fun too. Overall, I'd rank Super slightly higher than GT, maybe a high C tier. Now that we've gotten the sequel series out of the way, time to talk about classic Dragon Ball. I loved this story. I love this material, and it holds a special place in my heart. I want so desperately to put it in S tier right off the bat, but let's take a closer look at things. The first arc is pure 80s Toriyama gold in all of its glory. It's a solid first glimpse into the wacky world of Dragon Ball, so I'd give it a solid A. Every, and I mean every tournament in this series is S tier in my opinion, which leaves the Red Ribbon Army arc and the King Piccolo arc. The Red Ribbon Army arc is fun, but I'd still be inclined to give it an A or a B. But King Piccolo I've never gelled with personally. I find him largely uninteresting as a villain. I find that the arc is plagued with problems, from contrivances surrounding Goku's survival during Piccolo and his first encounter, to Goku drinking some magic water that makes him suddenly stronger. Something that actively flies in the face of a prior lesson Goku learns during the Red Ribbon Army arc, funnily enough. Toriyama was ill during this, and while I'm inclined to believe that impacted the story greatly, it can't exactly change my impression of the arc overall. It is what it is. I'd rank it a C perhaps, and so with that all taken into consideration, despite this early pre-Z material containing perhaps my favorite arc in the entire series, I can't see it fair to give it anything more than an A tier ranking personally. Competition is strong, so I gotta keep S tier sacred for now. Also, stay tuned later this summer for when I, for the first time on this channel, review Dragon Ball Z. Next up, One Piece.
It's the name of the treasure in the grand line. Daigo set sail for One Piece.
This is the first story I covered on this channel outside of Dragon Ball, and my god, was it a long but brilliant adventure. Spanning across 5 solid months and 24 individual review parts, my review of One Piece was a roller coaster, with me experiencing some of the most comprehensive, revealing, and impressively consistent character and story writing I had ever been exposed to. No manga had made me cry as frequently and consistently as One Piece, which is a testament to how well Oda realizes and writes his characters. Despite oftentimes being silly or offbeat, there are very few characters in this story that you could consider truly one-dimensional. one-dimensional, with Oda and his team breathing new life into this world and its inhabitants wherever they can, leading to some of the most heartbreaking, inspiring, epic, and action-packed scenes out there for consumption today. In more ways than one, One Piece helped to give me the courage to step out of my comfort zone and explore new material on my channel, and I honestly don't know where I would be if I hadn't taken that leap of faith. With that said, I am in a ruthless mood today, and S tier I don't think is for this series either. While the writing in One Piece is quite literally in a league of its own, there's more to storytelling when it comes to manga, and for me, for my personal tastes, Oda's paneling, particularly from the halfway point onward, really began to get cluttered and became at times off-putting for me when I was making my way through that material. I've had conversations with folks who say this is a clear S tier entry, and I can't exactly argue against what they like and enjoy. For me though, the panel work holds it back. One Piece sits proudly atop A tier. And so with One Piece now snugly in the A tier spot, I wonder, will the next one crack the all too elusive S tier? Hunter x Hunter has two relatively popular adaptations, each of which come with its own fan bases, which makes sense because both offer very different experiences. And while 2011 lends itself to such awesome and whimsical tones thanks to its color scheme and artistic approach, not to mention that slapping theme song, I think for me, it was 99's darker interpretation of the source material's manga that offers the most accurate version of the story. Plus,
Did you know that bungee gum has the properties of both rubber and gum?
and I'm a lover of the 90s animation aesthetic. It does, however, lose points for not covering nearly as much material as the 2011 variant, which at least feels like it reaches an endpoint to some extent. But this is where I'm going to get a little introspective here. When I dive into my reviews, one of my favorite things to do is research the author of the material as best I can to get a better handle on what exactly they are trying to say in their stories. However, when I did this with Togashi, the writer of Hunter x Hunter, it opened me up to the tortured, painful, and at times very dark world of a man struggling to sustain his physical health long enough to finish the story that he loves. Whether it be through interviews, reports, or direct text quotes from the beginning of each individual manga volume, these literal cries for help I felt began to permeate what was already a story with a darkness that resided beneath its surface, leading to one of the darkest feeling clouds hanging over the conclusion of any review series I've ever covered. When I throw myself into my work, I really try to immerse myself into the story and the world, and whether it was bad timing, whether it was caused by my research of Togashi, or whether I'm an overly sensitive person. By the time the final arc rolled around, I felt emotionally impacted by the material to such an extent that it literally altered my mood for the worse during the final stretch. And so I find ranking this particular story quite difficult. It's not like I haven't covered extremely dark material on my channel either, so my guess is as good as yours as to why I felt this way. But I do have a theory. In the same way I as a reviewer can appreciate the astounding merit of something like the Lord of the Rings trilogy without it necessarily being the sort of story that resonates with me personally, I can also appreciate how utterly emotionally cataclysmic something like Hunter x Hunter objectively is for millions around the world. With that said, I don't think Togashi would say that this series is without compromise either, given his circumstances, and personally, even if we remove the fact that this Ants arc wasn't for me personally, there were some creative decisions like having the entire infiltration of the Ants base suddenly get presented out of nowhere through a narrator that I found rather perplexing. And that said, the series is largely brilliant and it made me cry on more than one occasion, so it must have been doing something very, very right. Plus, the arcs I covered I liked the vast majority of, so I think for Hunter x Hunter, I'm comfortable sitting in a top A tier too. So, which is going to be the next one we're going to tackle on this tier list?
Yes! Hell yeah!
Match 3 puzzles are fun enough on their own, but what if you combine them with an RPG? Turns out you win a bunch of awards because that is exactly what Empires and Puzzles did, and it is so much fun, and it's free! You simply match shields of the same color to attack, and the more you match, the beefier your attacks will be, but while it's easy to get started, mastering it is a different story. Making sure you use your specials at the right moment is the key to good strategic play. But what also matters are your heroes. There are over 400 of these bad boys to collect, with new ones being added every month. They're super critical to play, and with each victory, you'll be using your rewards to build up their talent trees and summon even more powerful heroes. If you're crazy competitive like myself, you can actually hop into PvP and take on other players for even more rewards. It's a great solo experience, but playing with friends is even better. If you invite your friends along, you'll get some sick rewards for yourself, but your friend will also get a bunch too to help them catch up. So be sure to jump in soon so you don't miss the upcoming summer event. From June 12th to July 16th, the game will be releasing 10 new summer-themed heroes, exclusive event stages, and a bunch of special power-ups. It's entirely free. Just search Empires and Puzzles on either the iOS App Store or the Android Play Store and jump in today. You'll love it. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure was a weird one, and no, that is not a joke. This is a series that very much lived up to the bizarre in its title. And as those of you that have actually watched this review series of mine know, I went into this review of the manga material with a rather indifferent, or perhaps more accurately, a bad impression of the story from the famed mangaka Araki. Manga is by far and away my absolute favorite method of consuming these stories. Movies are fine, anime is great, and I totally see the appeal animation and music offers to the series, but I just cannot express how much better my experience with a story often is when I consume the material via the manga. I get to control my own pacing of the events to an extent. I enjoy deconstructing the page layouts to help me figure out what the author was thinking and perhaps where he's going. And unfortunately, for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I watched the anime first, and needless to say, it wasn't my bag at all. However, when I read the manga, I really enjoyed the first 3 or 4 parts. And funnily enough, it was part 5, the part that I had to watch instead of read through, that I once again disliked far more compared to the rest that I read. Outside of the material I found within the confines of the manga, I discovered a tremendous respect for Araki through reading the book he wrote about his life and indeed the challenges he faced as a mangaka. We're talking about a guy that had his back against the wall and instead of following trends, decided to blaze his own trail fearlessly, creating what is today one of the most prolific franchises in this industry. But despite my respect for Araki, I still have to give my impression on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, overall that of which I've read at least. I really liked the first 3 parts, as I said. I liked the 4th well enough, though I didn't think it lived up to the tremendous hype that people had surrounding it, though then again I don't think it ever could. And the 5th didn't click with me too well, though I did enjoy parts of it. The question, I think, is whether I give this series a B or an A. I'm inclined to give it a B, but only because I was forced to watch the anime of the 5th part instead of reading it because the material hadn't been officially released yet. Which admittedly could have changed my opinion on it in the same way my opinion had been changed on the first 3 parts. Who knows, I might pick this up and read the material once it's released in the manga, but until then, JoJo exceeded any and all expectations and sits nicely on B tier. Which brings me to... This one will be interesting to chat about, okay? So, of the many manga I've created reviews for, this is up there as one of the very most popular. Hundreds of thousands of people watched this series, the vast majority of which were either quite young or had grown up with that material. I, however, did neither. When I reviewed the Naruto series, I was 30 and had genuinely not seen a single episode of the show or chapter of the manga prior to picking up it for said review series. Given that the target audience was younger than my demo, and given that I was about to experience this story free of nostalgia, I was concerned I might not resonate with the material in a way that could be constructive or entertaining to the viewers I had. But Naruto surprised me, not just with the surprisingly mature subject matter concerning generational inheritance of responsibility, but additionally in how Naruto as a character reflected the agonizing journey towards success Kishimoto, the author, found himself on. This series, while I might not have loved it or resonated with it for the same reasons I might have when I was 10 years old, like I did with Dragon Ball, there was sufficient heart, humor, and depth to these stories and characters that genuinely ignited my imagination in a way that held my attention from beginning to end. I really don't think I can ask for much more than that with a story like this. I had some issues with it as I read along, and my god did some characters, I won't name names, make some questionable decisions which created contrived conflict. I will still, however, award this series an A tier. I really did enjoy the vast majority of it, and it even managed to squeeze a few tears out of me while my guard was down. But yeah, that's Naruto. Next up is... I'm going to try to keep this one real quick and concise, given I have not yet completed the story proper, but while I am here, I will award this series a spot on B tier while I await the time for me to review the 1000 Years Blood War, which might be the most metal arc title I've ever heard. I love the heart behind this series. I love the plot direction and growth for the character of Ichigo, and the artwork is something else. Unlike more crowded and exhausting reads like One Piece, Bleach's manga manages to stay breezy and fun to read by keeping things stunningly illustrated, utilizing white space, and always keeping page layout at the forefront of their minds. With that said, I do think that some of the arcs, namely the Arrancar arc, could have been significantly shorter without impacting the plot much at all, and they might have even seen some benefits by doing so. I get that a lot of folks must love the fight scenes in this series, and that's cool by me. I'm glad that you like it, but after 10 and tens of chapters of what felt like the same thing over and over again, I felt like the pacing could have been helped greatly had a greater emphasis been placed on story over the fighting itself. Perhaps I just have an entirely different taste in manga to most Bleach fans, and that is very possible. The Fullbring arc was honestly my favorite arc out of the entire read, and ironically, that isn't the case with the greater fan base. It was concise, it was mysterious, and the artwork was outstanding. It even got me excited for what was to come next, so yeah. For now, I think it's cool to place this on B tier, but who knows, it might go up after I finish reading the next arc. Next up... This story is still fresh in my mind, having just finished it a couple of weeks ago as of writing this video. But man, does this story feel like it was perfectly conceived of, illustrated, written, and delivered to my eyes. This is a story that lives up to every single last ounce of hype surrounding it. It destroyed me emotionally, captured my imagination with its world, and offered plenty to talk about week in and week out while I was reading and reviewing it. This is a story that's built such a powerful foundation that there are two entirely different interpretations of the story that have their own independent fan bases that swear their version is the best over the other. I don't think I've ever come across an instance where this has been the case with a given story. And if you watch my review series concerning it, you'll notice that I too struggled to find fault with this material, which is why I'm confident that this one can sit nicely as our first S tier entry. And by the looks of it, with our next entry, Fullmetal Alchemist might be getting some company up there.
If everyone is not special, maybe you can be what you want to be. You and me are not alike, night and day.
Every single time I review a story on this channel, it comes with a flood of, oh my god, you're gonna love this series, I just know it, it's the best. And while I do normally, as this tier list will reflect, love the stories I cover, there are very few that actually live up to that hype 100%. And maybe there's just one other that did, that made it to this level of, wow, it feels as though this series was tailor-made for me. Mob Psycho 100 is an emotional series. It's an hilarious series. Hell, this is just a terrific show from top to bottom. Everything from the themes explored to the broken characters that take center stage for us to watch as they struggle through their lives and grow from the traumas they encounter collectively. Out of every other single anime on this list, this stands as by far my favorite. It ruined me emotionally at the finish of each and every season. It knew exactly what it wanted to say, and it did not overstay its welcome like so many others I could argue are guilty for. Also, the music. Can we just talk about the music for a second? The OPs to this series were phenomenal, but I think the OST gets overlooked sometimes here. The strange instrumentation that echoes each and every one of Mob's power boosts is to this day able to bring shivers to my skin. It's just such an incredible series, and if it wasn't obvious already, I liked it even more than Fullmetal Alchemist, if that was even possible. If you haven't checked it out, please do. Reagan is awesome, and next up, something a little stranger.
Amen in the name of devil!
Come.
Chainsaw Man is a weird one to rank, as unlike most previous entries on this list, I've actually seen both the anime and manga versions, and with this story, each version offers a very different experience despite covering the same material. With the manga, we get pure, unfiltered, and hilarious Fujimoto in all of his glory, and things get really weird. Hilarious, but extremely weird. And while I would say that the anime adaptation is largely enjoyable, it is so in a very different way to that which Fujimoto's pure version might demonstrate. The anime itself is clearly directed by an individual with a distinct and obvious vision for how he sees things ought to be. And that's fair. This is how he sees Chainsaw Man, and so who am I to say that he's wrong if this is what he sees when he watches it? It's not like it doesn't look outstanding at times and offers a ton in its own right. It absolutely does. But what I will say is that what I love about Chainsaw Man's manga was that it felt entirely new. Unlike anything I'd ever read before, like the latest iteration of older ideas that came before. It plays with shapes, ideas, choreography, and pacing in such a frenetic fashion, all the while presenting it in some of the most imaginative ways I've ever seen put to paper. This is all to say that Chainsaw Man's manga feels distinctly its own thing, while the anime feels sort of like it's trying to be like something else, something that already exists, which might be unfair, but that's just how I felt after having watched it. Again, massively enjoyed it, just not in the same way I thought I would. That said, the manga is outstanding, so I think I'll slot Chainsaw Man in on A tier. There's a reason this wasn't a review series. There's a reason I wrote a near 3-hour-long review of this story. There's a reason why it's the most viewed video on my entire channel by far. It's because I had to gush and I loved it so damn much that I had to make what was, at the time, the biggest review on my channel. Also, I really liked the idea of calling this review the Colossal Review, and I stand by that decision. It was all worth the effort just so that I could have one massive video with that title. I started watching this series as it came out back in 2013, and I had kept up with it all the way to the ending. And don't worry, I won't be sharing any spoilers here, just my general thoughts. But in short, I don't think any other series on this list got me as excited to pick up and read the manga more than this story did. It's so well crafted and conceived, and while I know there are those out there that don't enjoy some parts of it, I loved it all. With that said, I didn't read the extended bonus chapter Isayama wrote after the series had technically finished outright, and I feel like if I do, I might not like it as much given people's reception about it. So yeah, if you don't like that I didn't read it, I don't care. This is going to be S tier. Moving on. I didn't cover this story so much in a review as I did analyze the greater story in general in a single shorter video, so I'll keep this one equally short. This is one of the first anime I watched while understanding what anime was in the first place. It's a classic, one that no doubt has stripped the social life of many adolescents, myself included, but you know what? The first half of the story is so damn good it almost made it worth it. And to be honest, I'm one of the few out there that actually quite enjoyed the second half too, but however, even with that second half being a little lackluster compared to the first, the ending that we landed on was sensational and the overall message of the piece was very interesting. If I was just considering the first half with L and the ending on its own, it'd be a shoo-in for S tier. But alas, I need to stick it in the bottom of A tier, maybe B tier. I'm gonna put it in A tier. And so now the time has come for the best manga I've ever reviewed on this channel. Drum roll please. Berserk. I finished reading and reviewing Berserk well over a year ago, and I swear to you all right now, not a day goes by without me thinking about a lesson I learned from this story at least once per day. There is quite literally nothing like this story on the market today. Nothing that can remotely come close to the colossal effort this manga boasts. I mean, this is quite literally the life's work of the now late great Kentaro Miura. Flick through to a random page in this manga and you'll no doubt discover a panel or two worthy of being a poster or mural on a wall. Where so much of the stories I cover deal with similar subject matter surrounding adolescence, there's a few lessons in here that I think everyone would benefit from learning at any point in their lives and experiencing through this book. particularly if you might have troubling or distant relationship with your parents and or feel isolated. I won't dare spoil a single word of this for any of you out there, but this is the manga that literally changed my outlook on life for the better, and to say that it's an S tier entry almost seems unsatisfactory. It almost deserves more, so if you haven't seen it, I beg you to give it a shot. I know you won't regret it. This is the best manga on this list, and I can't imagine anything will top this. Hope you enjoyed today's video, and again, be sure to download Empires & Puzzles on either Apple's App Store or Android's Play Store.